Kevin, I'm actually going to ask you where you want to start with this new rules. Do you want to start with a broad stroke of a change in discipline of what the club might have been under Valverde and Setien and Koeman that has been changed, or maybe take the complete, the Athletics Dermot Corrigan's approach and just say, hey, it's a lot of talk until the results come, and you can talk all you want about rules and discipline, but if results don't change, then what did it all matter? Which I think is the non-Kool-Aid approach to take from that.
So, I mean, that's long been my view, and I took a little bit of stick for saying that, Setien said the right things at his press conference too, right? Also, he and Xavi have that in common. Setien got no results because he didn't have the backbone to match his grand ideas. Now comes Xavi. He has rules. I mean, so rules are a foundation for building a group dynamic, and rules are a structure that allow people to understand that, one, there's a new boss in town, and mostly there's a different way of doing things now. Fines, they're nominal, right? I mean, what can you fine a millionaire, right, for being late to practice? But it's the structure behind those rules. I mean, Xavi, so it's funny because like the Guardiola comparisons, right, are apt and not quite so. I mean, both of them came into a damaged team. The difference is Xavi is coming in mid-season. Guardiola came in at the summer. Guardiola had a much better team to call upon than Xavi does.
His first 11 was pretty incredible.
I mean, right?
Yeah,
and then he brought in
Eto, Thierry Henry as a pretty good 11.
Right. I mean, and then he brought in Daniel Les. He promoted Busquets. I mean, where Xavi has, a damaged 11 and some other guys. And so I think that these rules, will make people understand that things are different. And I believe the same thing as Dermot, which is, it now, mind you, it will take some time, because this team is broken. It's physically broken. It's psychologically damaged. It's a mess right now. This is a group, as we saw versus Celta, right, that is expecting bad things to happen. And so when bad things happen, they aren't even that shocked, right? I mean, we all knew that third goal was coming. The only question was when. And, when Aspas was standing there by himself, I said to myself, here's number 3. And sure enough, he choked it home. Now, how you can leave the most dangerous man on the pitch for the opponent staying there at the edge of the box unmarked, right, is beyond me. But it's typical of how the team is playing right now. They're allowing bad things to happen, which meets their expectation of bad things to happen. So Xavi has a massive job on his hands. My guess is that he will get clunky results the first 3 or 4 matches, rules or no, and then you'll start to see something, whatever it is, take shape.
Well, yeah, I mean, for the first few matches, it starts with Espanyol and that derby. Sure, they're the same on points, but Barcelona should be better than Espanyol. And I mean, if anything, you need that extra to get up for that match, then maybe that's the team to get up for. But really, it comes down to Benfica, because if the forward line doesn't get any healthier, things don't change over the next few days and now 2 weeks, then Benfica could see a starting front 3. I mean, again, unless I can't imagine Xavi actually sticking with it. But right now, the only front three healthy players are it's Memphis, it's Luke de Jong, and it's Demir at the moment. But obviously Xavi could, Gavi, there we go. Gavi could play on the right wing. But yeah, it's funny you mentioned the fines too. I mean, what is the saying they say about fines? That fines don't mean anything to the rich. They're merely the price of doing business, right? That a parking ticket
Yeah.
is really it's not anything. It's not a ticket because the fines are all about the system itself. But the fines escalating every time. In theory, it sends a message, and also in theory, it's a lot easier instead of having to throw it's one thing for a manager to have to throw a player under the bus for something they've done privately and put that out in public. And it's another thing where a fine means that the player has almost made a choice to do that thing. So it does absolve the manager of that conflict, if that makes sense. And I think
Correct.
just for PR terms, it's a little bit easier to say, hey, he chose to be late 3 times in a row. That's why he was fined 3 times. Those are just the rules that I've established. It's not me versus him. It's just him breaking those rules. And some of the other ones too, training staff to be there 2 hours early, players an hour and a half, eating breakfast and lunch together with nutritionists, individual training. And I think a lot of that is, again, if players continue to get injured, the question marks will continue to be raised. Now, if it goes 3 months and there are no major injuries, no major calamities, and players stay healthy, well, then I guess you could say that he had some success in those rules. But again, those rules don't mean anything. The nutrition rules and the food rules and even the individual training, anything like that, it doesn't mean anything until players actually stay healthy, until there's actual, and not even results on the field. I just mean players physically playing. It's one thing to
Right.
be not on the field, and it's another thing to be playing poorly on the field. And then even other stuff like PK, less public appearances. You've seen that, and that'll be one of the ways that his friends or the captains can help Xavi a bit and give him the backbone that Setien never got. You know what I mean? Because that's what you said. The difference between Setien and Xavi is that Xavi might have the fortification from the players and the president and the entire club to have the backbone that Setien wasn't allowed to have. And Riqui Puig is one. I think you were mentioning this on Twitter too. That
Riding the scooter.
Right. There's a little thing about the scooter, and who knows when or where that was. But regardless of what that is, this is Riqui Puig's last stand. I talked about it in the earlier show too. That if he not even fails against Xavi, but if he doesn't get his opportunity, he's not going to get his opportunity at all. But I could also see
He's
him.
done.
But I also see him almost being made of an example of, hey, this is a La Masia kid, this is whatever. But if he were to break a rule with the scooter incident, that tells me a lot more about how Xavi's going to go about his first team players than it is about him not playing. Because I don't actually expect him to play because, again, he's behind Pedri and Gabi and Nico Gonzalez and Busquets and De Jong. And listen, there is absolutely no... It's like a knock on him. It's no knock to need to get other first team football. Carlos Alenya left, and we always thought that he probably could have made it, but he was always going to be 5th or 6th on that depth chart, and so he went and got first team football. And failing to break in a midfield like that at Barcelona with 3 of the most impressive teenagers that we've ever seen in world football, along with Frankie De Jong, who's 70 million euros, and Busquets, who changed an entire position, it's okay. Right. So we don't need to do the Puig thing. But as far as the rules and the discipline, I could quickly see how he and Umtiti and Coutinho, how players on the fringes become the example of some of these rules very quickly if those are broken.
Yeah, I mean, I think that so the biggest thing that Xavi's going to have to do is find a way to show the team he means business, right? Guardiola rolled in, you and you out. Right, so it was Deco, Ronaldinho, and Eto'o. He's like, "All right, you guys out."
Yeah. What is the equivalent? Let me just ask you, what do you think the equivalent of Xavi doing that in this current team would be? I mean, is Coutinho even on that level?
No, the thing what would be really interesting, right, would be for him to look at the captains and look at the captains very seriously, right? I mean, I think that, Jordi Alba is a wreck. And people say, yeah, he's fine on the during the match. He is, but mentally, at the least pressure, the guy collapses like a Jenga tower in a tornado. PK, the defense was better without him, right? Busquets, people say he still has it. They're raving about, that Rondo, right, during the Spanish national team training. The problems with Busquets aren't on the ball, right? They're when the opponent has the ball. Right. So, I mean, you have these 3 players, right, who are all captains, plus Sergio Roberto. And I don't think any of them belong in the X1. And so you have a complexity as a new manager where you have carte blanche, right? You have, you really have, now that Pedri's back in training, you have your midfield. You could sit Busquets, rotate De Jong into that role, run a four-man midfield with Nico, Pedri, Gavi, and De Jong, and I would bet that team would be fantastic to watch, right? And it would be able to defend a counter.
And it's not that surprising, though, because looking at his tactics from Al Sadd, he did play with two pivots at times with two center midfielders or interiors in front of it. So what you just laid out is not that crazy at all based on what he's going to be bringing in, some of those ideas.
Yeah. So I think that, I mean, it would be interesting to see him take some sort of a posture with the captains, right? Where maybe they're fit and don't start. I mean, obviously he can't jettison them with Guardiola and Ronaldinho, which was, yeah, I don't know if people fully recall how seismic that was back then, right? I mean, because Ronaldinho was everything to Barcelona, and yeah, he had let himself go. He was a party boy. He was diminished in his powers, but still, to have a new coach come in and say to the team icon, "You out," was, it really set a tone. Xavi has to find some way to set a tone. Fines aren't that way, right? The question is, you know, rules aren't that way. So it'll have to be something significant, right? That involves the team. What that will be, who knows? But I could see him sitting one and or more of the captains and making that statement that we have to have people out there who can run,
Yeah,
who can move. And I mean, we have to have people out there who are not standing around waiting for bad things to happen. And I appreciate everyone and their devotion to the captains. But for me, none of them should be on the pitch with the starting 11 right now. Not a single one of them.
It's interesting, his words, the way he talked about the psychological pressure of playing at Barca and trying to understand that and individually help players with that responsibility. And it seems very telling that the way that he spoke about that responsibility almost indicates, or tipping his hat to say that, well, I understand that Coutinho can't handle that responsibility and it's just not going to work right. It's just not going to work out for him. That's not going to happen. But even that lending its hand to the captains in the likes of Piqué and Alba, who we know their performances sink as Barcelona sinks. It just happens. It's a symbiotic relationship between clubs' results and their form when things go bad. And that's going to be, again, the biggest challenge of Xavi, because even a yelly guy like Koeman could not be the one to say, when a match goes sideways, this stops now from the touchline and get that onto the field. And so that's going to be the big question. And as far as reinforcements and the power that Xavi has, one of the first things, here's another transition, one of the first things or question marks that he's going to have is with his technical secretary and Ramon Planes to leave Barcelona now. He wants to end his contract early, leaving Matteo Alemany and Rafa Juste to find a new technical director. And Ramon Planes, for the background, for those who don't care about, you know, the guys in suits, he arrived from Adafe back in 2018, did play a big role. He's credited. Now, this also gets picked up by the media and recycled a million times. So the names that we hear are Ronald Araujo and Pedri, but he could have had a hand in a number of young players throughout the club. Like, I mean, you don't know of 17-year-old Fabian Luzi right now from Rayo Vallecano, but there are just all these different names of players who could have been picked up at some point that he scouted or had a hand in sending a scout or whatever it was. But as far as replacing him, of course, I think Barcelona's answer is not the one that you saw that media kind of recycled, right? Like Michael Zorc was one of the names from UC Dortmund, right? Well, he's leaving Dortmund to be replaced by Sebastian Kell, but Zorc is retiring after 25 years. He's a one-club man. He's only ever been with Borussia Dortmund. His father played a German football that he winds up being with Dortmund his whole career. So no, Michael Zorc is not leaving Germany to come to Barcelona. He's retiring. He's going off into the sunset. Agent Carlos Puyol is going to be constantly, because of the relationship with Xavi and Puyol. Puyol is going to be, you know, if a PR person leaves or if a marketing director leaves, Puyol's name is going to be thrown in there because Puyol's name is going to be attached to this project as long as he is not attached to this project. And then the third name was Mark Overmars from Ajax, but I mean, he's pretty entrenched in that. And if he's going to leave for money, it's going to be for Newcastle money. It's not going to be for whatever Barcelona has for Mark Overmars. But I could also see Mark Overmars took the jump to Barcelona once before, but he also, if you remember when Barca got him as a player, they had to overpay for him the first time around, right? And so do they have to overpay for him again from Ajax? But the other answer would be that Xavi is also apparently asking to see the full squad before worrying about January transfers, including even more players from the academy, thinking about what they might have and what they can bring. And honestly, I have to be fully honest as I throw this over to you, Kevin. The winning squad that we saw on Twitter today with Puig and Diego Almeida, right? Listen, I pride myself on knowing the faces and the names and these players all the way down to the Juvenal Bay and Cadet A with the U16s. That's usually what I cover for my winter whatever, my summer whatever. There was two players. I was like, I don't know who that is. I don't know that face. It's too young, right? So now we've got players. I mean, now we got players 16, 17 years old who I have to Google and figure out, oh, that's Juan David. Like I knew the name, but I didn't. I mean, I thought this kid was going to be the Juvenal Bay for 2, 3, 4 years, or not, not Juvenal Bay, right? But I figured he'd be in the academy for quite a few more years. He's not even the ones that I recognize. So when I say that the faces in training during international break tell me that Xavi is literally lifting every stone, the winning squad today tells me that Xavi is taking all 40 or 50 young players from 16 to 19 who play anywhere from Juvenal Bay to Barca B. He is uncovering all 40 to 50 of those stones. That winning squad tells me that he is not afraid to bring any young player into that training. And I don't think that's going to change when the internationals come back either. If that means that, I know there's only 25 registered, but he can play those U19 players. Like Ilasha Komash, we might just, he might just be a first teamer now. I mean, we don't know. Like Xavi's going to pick his favorites. And it's going to take a week or two to figure out who those are. And, listen, again, if it's Luke de Jong and Memphis and Demir, or your three options for Benfica, it's not insane that Ilasha Komac is going to start that game. Not crazy at all.
No, and I mean, the shame is that, one, that Abde wasn't beheaded for his actions late in the Celta match, but he's not registered for the Champions League squad because he is a very dynamic player on that right wing. And once we get Demir off the milk carton and back in the F1 or, back on the bench, that'll be a very interesting notion as to whether, because there's no question that Demir is insanely talented. The question seems to be that he's a punk and he gets shoved around too easily. He shrinks in the face of pressure. That's not a thing you can have at that level of football, and that's why he hasn't been around. Now, the larger question is whether everything was so damaged under Koeman that nobody could do anything. I mean, when you think about the psychological pressure, right? And how the young players have just rolled in like, what pressure? When Dembele came in, he was like, what pressure? Right? This is what I do. So it's not like this is a universal thing, but there are certain key players, right, outside of Coutinho. There are certain key players who don't look equipped right now to handle that pressure. And I think that, the most difficult decision Xavi will have, I think, is what to do about the captains, right? Because I don't know. My mind reaches and can't think of a team where all 4 captains, none of them belong in the starting 11, And so I don't know what he does about that. But the biggest thing is that he's got to get everybody healthy. I don't know. So, reports are the team has only 10 million to spend the January window. So standing pat's not a bad idea anyway, unless Newcastle comes calling for a Coutinho. then you have a little bit of cash to throw around. But I just don't think the club's transfer record right now. I mean, look at who. I mean, granted they've all been on freeze, but Depay has lost the fire, and with no one to play off, he's even more ineffective. De Jong, I mean, that giant inflatable thing in the goal and with the waving arms is more effective than De Jong. The heart thing for Akun, and I hope he comes out okay. That doesn't sound good.